evening and good morning, everyone. I welcome all of you to this online webinar on Azure administration. Hope I'm audible to all of you and my screen is visible to all of you. Thanks for confirmation. So now let me start our agenda. So we are going to understand how you can administer Azure resources using Azure infrastructure. So where I'm going to give you overview of few services into Microsoft Azure so that you can understand what kind of infrastructure is there which you can manage, which you can utilize into your architectural diagram or into your solutions. So let me introduce first of all myself. So my name is Sanjay Singh and I would be your trainer for this webinar. I have 17 years plus of experience into IT training as well as into production. So I do have certification in the same domain. So where I have certification into Microsoft Azure Fundamental, Azure Administration, Azure Architecting and Designing, Azure Security, Azure Networking, and Azure DevOps. Now, apart from Azure domain, I have certification into AWS Cloud as well. So where I have certification into AWS Cloud Practitioner, AWS Cloud Solution Architect, Associate Professional, AWS Security, and AWS Networking Specialist. Apart from AWS domain, I have certification into Microsoft Windows Server family as well. So where I have certification into Windows Server 2003, 2008 R2, 2012 R2, 2016, and MCSE into private cloud. And when it comes to networking domain, so yes, I do have certification into networking domain as well. So where I have certification into Cisco routing and switching, Huawei routing and switching, and I'm an authorized trainer for Microsoft, Huawei, and AWS. So let me start our agenda, our webinar agenda, which you can see here. So we will start with introduction to this webinar. Azure Resource Management, Azure Networking, Azure Identity and Access Management, Azure Monitoring and Troubleshooting, and then you can ask your question and answer. You can post your questions and I'll answer to your questions. So let me start with Microsoft Cloud Computing. So when it comes to cloud computing, like introduction to cloud, just because when it comes to Microsoft Azure, it means we're talking about public cloud. If you're talking about public cloud, it means we are going to use resources which will be provided by a service provider. So in our case, our service provider would be Microsoft Azure. So what is cloud computing? How we can define cloud computing? So it's very easy to define cloud computing. It's very easy to understand cloud computing. So cloud, what is cloud? If we are going to access any IT service, any means any, if we are accessing any IT service over the internet and for which we are paying to our service provider, like compute resources, networking, storage, analytic tools, data scientist tools, correct? So if I'm utilizing any IT service over the internet, accessing any IT service over the internet, and I'm paying for that service, so that is known as cloud computing. It means I'm using cloud services. So cloud computing is the delivery of computing services over the internet, which enable faster innovation. Just because when it comes to your end, if you are going to set up your environment, your data center, which can take lots of efforts as well as there would be upfront investment. Flexible resources, you will get scalable resources. So based on your requirement, you can scale up, scale down your resources at any time. Economics of scale. So again, when it comes to cloud, cloud is a pay-as-you-go model where you will get metering. So metering will be there. So based on your utilization, you will get your bill. So your service provider will meter your resource utilization. And based on your utilization, you will get a bill. So that's why it's a pay-as-you-go model, which you will use. Next, when it comes to Microsoft Azure, so right now, nowadays we are using ARM model. So Azure portal, let me show you the portal. So this would be my portal UI. I'll go to my portal. So this would be my portal UI. So this Azure service basically that is provided by ARM, Azure Resource Management. So what benefit we will get if we are using Azure Resource Management? So previous portal was classic portal. Nowadays we are using ARM portal, ARM model. So which provides a consistent management layer where you will be able to perform different types of API call. So you can use Azure portal, web, PowerShell, CLI, REST client, and other SDKs if you're working as a developer, which enables you to work with resources in a solution as a group. It means you can group your resources into a container, and that container is basically known as resource group. So that if I have similar kind of workload, if I have similar kind of resources, or if I have to implement some policies or some RBAC permissions. So, and I need a scope where I can scope my policies and permission, I can use group. If I'm in dev and test environment where I have to deploy some resources, and after my testing I have to delete or deprovision those resources, so I need some group where I can create my resources, and rather than deleting individual resources, delete a group and which will delete all the resources inside that group automatically. So deploy, update, delete in a single coordinated operation. So you can deploy your resources, you can update your resources, you can delete your resources. Rather than deleting individual resources, you can delete your resource group, which will delete all the resources. It provides security, as I already told you, that we can implement our RBAC permissions, we can audit our resources, we can use tags. So we can tag our resource group and resources, which will provide metadata to our resources, and we would be able to easily audit our resource using tags. Choose the tools and API. Now again, it comes to our end. If I'm coming from, let's assume, from Windows background, I'm working as a Windows admin into my organization. Now I'm moving into cloud. So on cloud, which tool I will use to manage my resources, either for automation or for my deployments? So basically, when it comes to Windows admin, so Windows admin, they are having knowledge of PowerShell. So you can use PowerShell for your deployments. When it comes to Linux admins, so if we are coming from Linux, it means we have experience into Bash. So we can use CLI, Azure Bash, Azure CLI to manage our resources, to manage our deployments. We can use Azure CLI. Similarly, if I'm coming from software background, I'm working as a software developer, front end, back end, or full stack developer. So what I can do, I can use SDKs, Java, PHP, Python, Ruby. I can use different SDKs and I would be able to call my services using SDKs. So we have a consistent layer which you can see, and we would be able to perform different API calls, which will be authenticated. As you can see, authentication is there. So it will start authentication first, and after authentication, it will use RBAC permission, that means authorization. So if you are authorized for data store, you would be able to access data store. If you are authorized for web application, you can access web applications. If you are authorized for virtual machines, you can easily access virtual machines as well. So based on the permission, you would be able to access your resources into your environment. Next, resource groups, a container basically where you will keep your resources. So whenever you will deploy any resource like virtual machine, virtual network, load balancer, or any other resource like database, managed database, your own database. So where you will keep your database, first you have to create a container, which is known as basically resource group. So it's a logical container. So resource can only exist in one resource group. It means if I'm deploying resources like virtual machine, disk, storage, or database, so it will be only available within a single resource group. You cannot keep your same resource into multiple resource groups. No, that is not possible. Groups can have resources for many different types, like services. Like I can create my virtual machine in the same resource group, virtual network in the same resource group, database in the same resource group, any AI ML tool, DevOps tool, I can keep into the same resource group. That's totally up to me. Or any IoT tool as well. Groups cannot be renamed. So once you created your resource group, you cannot rename resource group. You have to delete and you need to create new resource group. Groups cannot be nested. So group nesting is not allowed. So inside a group, we cannot create another group. Group nesting is not allowed into Azure. Deployments are incremental into your resource group. When it comes to deploying your resources, again, it depends on your requirements and pattern, where you can see we have two patterns, 1 and 2. Let's assume I'm deploying 3-tier application, 3-tier application. So where we have front end, that means web application, we have backend, and we have storage, that means database. So the 3 components associated to my application, and assume my application URL is www.xyz.com. So basically users are sending requests to this URL, but behind this URL, we have resources, backend resources. So where we are using 3-tier. So what I can do, I can keep my all application component into a single resource group, so that I can manage my all resources within the resource group. It would be easy for me to audit my resources. If I'm working on a specific project, It would be easy for me to apply compliance rule, policies based on the resource, based on the industry standard. I can apply my compliance rule, which I will apply to my resource group, and it will be inherited to my all resources. And where I can run evaluation, where I can evaluate compliant and non-compliant resources. That I can do. Next option is what I can do. I can segregate my resource group, which you can see. So for web instances, I can create a separate resource group. For web and DB, for virtual machine, I can create a separate resource group, and for storage account, I can create separate resource group. But best practice would be if we have resources which are connected to a single entity, it would be easy to connect your resources, or it would be easy to manage your resources within the resource group, a single resource group, so that you will get complete visibility over the resources. Resource tags. So resource tags means, again, it will provide metadata to your Azure resources. So logically organize your resources into a taxonomy so that you would be able to again access your resources. You can audit your resources, and for billing purpose also you can use your tags. What it does mean by for billing purpose, it means assume I have only one subscription, Azure subscription. So when it comes to billing into Azure, you have to purchase subscription. So assume I'm working into a small organization and I purchase only one subscription. Now inside my subscription, I am working on 3 projects. So what I did, I created resource groups, 3 resource groups to isolate my workload for projects. Now I have resources into these resource groups for different projects. So how I can check my bill for this specific project, just because right now I have a single billing account, and now I need consolidated billing for my projects, it would be difficult for you. So what we can do, we can create tags. So tags is a key and value pair where you will assign some key and there would be some value, like project. So project is a key and there would be some value, like I'm working on MS project, Microsoft project, so this would be value. So I can assign a tag to my resources which would be in MS project, to all resources same tag, so that I can list my all resources, I can audit my all resources, or I can check bill for this particular project resources. I can use, like, if there would be multiple professionals who are working into your project and they are responsible for deploying resources, so you can provide a tag which will be owner. So who is the owner of this resource? What I can do, like I can write my name here, like Sanjay is the owner of this resource. So what I can do, I can audit all the resources which are created by Sanjay at any time, if there would be tag on your resources. So tags are very useful, and it is recommended by Microsoft, rather than using few tags, use more tags, so that you have options to audit your resources based on your requirement. So project, owner, environment, like production, dev, test, logistic. So we can assign multiple tags to our resources, and we would be able to audit our resource. We can filter our resource. As a networking now, which is a very important and it's a core part of infrastructure. So when it comes to designing an infrastructure, so first you will start designing your infrastructure with network part. So where you should have knowledge of networking. So when it comes to Microsoft and on-premises, when we need hybrid connectivity, so how we can set up a hybrid environment if we already have a data center, an on-premise data center. Now we are moving into cloud, correct? So our few resources are into our on data center and few resources are into cloud, where we need to connect now cloud to on-premises. It means hybrid connectivity. How we will create a hybrid cloud? So to create hybrid cloud, we have to create a virtual network, which is also known as VPC, Virtual Private Cloud. So it's a private cloud into Azure, private network into Azure. So similar to LAN. So basically it's a LAN environment into cloud, into Azure cloud, which you will create. So where you will create your virtual network, your VNet, the address space. Inside your address space, you will create your subnets. It means you will logically divide your virtual network into multiple subnets based on the requirement again. So if I have multiple application tiers, if you remember, like front end, back end, and database, so I can create 3 subnets to isolate my workload, and where I can implement my port filtering, that means my firewalls, and I can filter my traffic based on the requirement, which I can perform using VNet. So VNet will give you isolation and customization into cloud, and you would be able to connect your network from cloud to on-premises using gateway, VPN gateway. So you will use VPN gateway where you can create site-to-site connectivity, or you can use direct connect also. Direct connect service, which will give you private dedicated connection using your ISP line. So we have two options to connect our on-premise to cloud or cloud to on-premise. Either we can use VPN or we can use direct connect. Now it depends which option we will choose. Again, it depends on our requirement as well as on compliance. Correct? Just because using VPN you will get maximum 5 Gbps bandwidth. When it comes to direct connect, you can get up to 100 Gbps based on the plan. Gbps, 100 Gbps bandwidth. So again, it depends. If I have some compliance rule which state that you should use a private and dedicated connection, which should not go over the internet. Your data should not travel over the internet. If we have this kind of compliance rules, so what we can do, we can use direct connect. If we have to transfer larger data sets, if we have migration project where we need high bandwidth, we can use direct connect, or we can use both as well. I can use VPN as well as direct connect also. If we have a project which would be business critical project and where we don't want any downtime. So what if ISP will be down? If ISP will be down, it means your direct connect line will be down and there would be downtime. So what you can do, you can use VPN again for a secure failover to your direct connect. So it will give you a logical separation into your cloud, and where you would be able to use your private networks, private IP addresses, network space into cloud, and which makes your network as VPC, virtual private cloud. That is called VNets. So very important part into any cloud virtual network, where you will customize and isolate your workload, and you would be able to filter your traffic from one tier to another tier. So it's very important topic. Security groups. So whenever you will deploy resources like virtual machines, VMs into Azure, Windows or Linux, so by default one firewall will be associated. It's a basic firewall, but one firewall will be associated, that is known as security group, on your resource, and it's a layer 4 firewall. So when I'm saying layer 4, it means it will filter your traffic based on the TCP and UDP protocol, based on the TCP and UDP, where you will get two rules, inbound and outbound rule, which you will configure, inbound rule and outbound rule. So by default, all ports and protocols are denied into your firewall. So explicitly, you will open your ports and protocol into your firewall. So it limits your traffic to your resources into virtual network, limit the security rules that allow or deny inbound or outbound network traffic associated to subnet or to network interface. It means we have two scopes to associate this firewall. So default is your virtual machine, and we can associate to subnet as well optionally if we have some common role. Can be associated multiple times. So we can associate a network security group multiple times to our resources. When it comes to high availability, next topic, high availability. So for HA, for high availability, to increase your SLA, high availability means we are talking about SLA, service level agreement, where you will ensure your clients that if there would be some downtime, so this would be the minimum or maximum downtime. How we will define that? So basically we will provide one SLA to our client, to our customer, correct? And to increase our SLA, to increase our uptime for resources, we will create identical resources, more than one identical resources, to ensure that if one server fails, still my application will be up and running from other servers. So we will create identical resources. But when it comes to end user who is sending request, so end user needs a front door, a single address where your end user will send requests. Just because in backend you have multiple servers, and having multiple servers means there would be multiple IP addresses. So how I can give a single IP address to my application? So what we will do, we will use load balancer. So where we can use Azure Load Balancer, it's a standard load balancer, layer 4 load balancer. Again, which will distribute your traffic based on the TCP and UDP protocol. So end user will send request to your load balancer front end. Front end means public IP address. Public IP address associated on your load balancer front end. So your end users will send request to public IP addresses. Load balancer will receive this request, and then load balancer will check its load balancing rule. Just because on internet your load balancer can receive requests on any port protocol, but it doesn't mean that your load balancer will entertain all ports and protocol. No, we are not going to entertain all ports and protocol. So what we will do, we will create a load balancing rule that I'm going to entertain port 80 or port 443, but this port 443 is not supported by Azure Load Balancer. Port 80, which will be open, and requests will be sent to backend pool on port 80 and their private IP addresses, where load balancer performs health check also. health check. So your load balancer continuously send a request to backend resources to check their health, a periodic request, where if any server becomes unhealthy, load balancer will not distribute traffic to that particular server. So it's a layer 4 load balancer. If you have some requirement where you need advanced load balancer, then we have application gateway. Application gateway, as name state, it works on layer 7, application layer, and where you will get advanced features like web support, static IP address support, correct, firewall support. You will get path-based routing, content-based routing, connection training feature, sticky sessions. So there are multiple features which you will get with along with application gateway. And SSL termination. Hope you heard about SSL termination. So which you will get in application gateway. So when it comes to encrypting traffic, so we would be able to encrypt our traffic from user's browser to application gateway. And behind application gateway, we can send our traffic which will be unencrypted. We will offload our certificate, that is known as SSL offload. So this feature you will get into application gateway. Application gateway which provides path-based routing also, like if I have contents, different type of content like images into my website and videos, what I want, whenever a user who will send request to images, so the request should send to images server. And whenever a user who will request for videos, so the request should send to video server. So it means I'm in backend, I'm hosting two multiple servers which have images content and videos content. What I want, whenever a user who will type in his browser like www.abc.com/images, so my load balancer, it should read this URL, and based on the request, this query should send to the particular server, backend server. So this will be done by only application gateway. So it's an advanced load balancer into Azure, which will give you advanced feature. So it listen your URL, layer 7 URL, and it will redirect your request to the correct backend server. So this feature you will get into application gateway. Next topic, Azure Identity and Access Management. So when it comes to cloud, again in cloud, when it comes to managing users, identities means users and service principals. So we have Entra ID. Entra ID, formerly it was known as Azure Active Directory. So now that is known as Entra ID. So we have Entra ID, which is a primary solution for managing identities into cloud, into Azure cloud. So it's a cloud-based suite. It means you would be able to access your directory over HTTP and HTTPS protocol. It's an online service, which have capabilities that enables you to securely manage access to Azure services and resources for your users, where you can create your users for authentication purpose and you can authorize your users, which provides application management. You would be able to manage your application. You can manage authentication. You can manage your devices. You can add your devices and you can implement your policies and hybrid identities as well. Now, what is hybrid identities? Hybrid identities, as you can see this image. So let me show you. As you can see, we have on-premise. So let me show you one image so that you can relate to this image. As you can see, this diagram. So where we have on-premise. So this would be my on-premise data center, where you can see when it comes to setting up an on-premise data center, we have to create a centralized server into on-premises. This centralized server is known as domain controller. So you will set up a domain controller where we will install a role that is known as Active Directory Domain Services role on our server, which we will install and configure. Then this server will become DC, domain controller. So inside your organization, you will get a domain controller, which would be a centralized server. Now your clients and other servers, they will join this domain so that your domain controller will manage all these clients and servers. Inside your data center, you will use some hypervisor like Hyper-V, ESXi, or Citrix Zen server, where you will create your virtual machines and you will host your other servers. When it comes to DNS, you will use an internal DNS server into your organization, which will be connected to your domain controller. Correct. And when it comes to authentication, so for authentication purpose, we are using Kerberos protocol into on-premises. Our domain controller, it uses Kerberos protocol for authentication purpose. And when it comes to querying, so for query purpose, we are using LDAP, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. So this would be an idea basically for on-premises. So it means if we are already working into an organization where we have our domain controller, our identities within the organization, existing identities which are already working on projects, basically clients project. Now we are shifting into cloud, we are moving into cloud. So if we are moving into cloud, so in cloud we have cloud directory, which is known as Entra ID, which is also basically designed for identity management. But we are already using some identity server, directory server into our organization where we already have 500 users. So if we are going into cloud, it means we have to create users here also into cloud. But this would be not a best practice. Why? Just because in that case, your users need to manage two accounts. They need to maintain two accounts, and which would be a not a best practice. Correct. So what we can do, we can sync our existing user from on-premises to cloud. We can sync our existing user, and that is known as syncing existing identities. That is known as hybrid identities. So you can sync your existing users. You can implement SSO, single sign-on, and using the same ID and same password, your users would be able to access resources into on-premise or cloud. It depends basically based on the authorization. They can access resources into cloud, as well as they would be able to work into on-premises as well using same account and same password. So where in cloud we have authentication protocol SAML. So SAML is the default authentication protocol, web identity authentication protocol. Then we have auth, OpenID, and web federation also, which are supported into cloud. And on-premises we have Kerberos and NTLM authentication protocol. So yes, we can connect our on-premise users using hybrid identity, and we would be able to sync our existing users where we have different methods for authentication, like password hash synchronization and pass-through authentication. Meanwhile, in your chat box, if you all will check, so there's a feedback form. I would request all of you to give your feedback, please, at the same time. Next, again, when it comes to our identity, cloud identity, so how we will create users into cloud. So as you can see, we can create user accounts where you can see this slide. So I would be able to create my users account. I can create my all users. I can invite users. So I can use my directory for B2B and for B2C, business to business collaboration and business to consumer. Correct. We have two options where I can use in business to consumer. I can use third-party identity providers like Facebook, like Instagram, like LinkedIn, Microsoft, Gmail. So I can use existing identities and I would be able to authenticate my users. So rather than maintaining database for users, what we can do, we can call third party to authenticate my users. Correct. And B2B means we have a directory here into our account, or might be I'm having tie-up with some other organization which is having Azure Active Directory. So what we can do, in both directories we have users, but user UPN will be different. So I will authorize by using B2B collaboration, I would be able to authorize other directories users as well. That is called B2B collaboration. So we can create users within the directory, within the organization. We can invite guest users for B2B collaboration as well. We can implement multi-factor authentication to our users. When it comes to our organization, in your organization, you will get management critical accounts like storage admin, like VM admin, network admin, DevOps engineer. Correct. So you will get some management critical accounts which have some privilege on their account. So we need to protect these accounts. How we will protect these accounts? So we can use multi-factor authentication. Using multi-factor authentication, we would be able to provide two-step verification where user will receive request on their mobile phone using app code, app authenticator, or email, or mobile SMS text. Correct. So it depends what method user will use to set up MFA. So we can implement MFA, multi-factor authentication. Correct. Using our directory, we can create groups. We can reset our user password. We can implement one feature that is not in our slide, but let me tell you this feature into Entra ID that is known as SSPR, self-service password reset. What if we have a group in which we have admin accounts, and assume one admin user who forget his password. So what is the process to reset password? What he will do? So basically he will create one ticket to our IT help desk to reset password, which can take some time. Correct. But what we want, whenever an admin who forgets his password, he should reset his password immediately. How he will do that? So what we can do, we can enable SSPR, self-service password reset. He would be able to reset his password by on. immediately within few minutes. That is called SSPR feature. We have policies into Active Directory, like that is known as conditional access policy. If you will compare with on-premises, so in on-premises we are using group policies. Now, group policies are not supported into Azure Cloud, where we have conditional access policy. So based on the condition, you can create policies. Like I can create a policy for device. So my user who is using, let's assume, Windows 10 device and browser, let's assume Google Chrome. So what I will do, I will register these devices into cloud. And I will enforce one policy. If my user is sending requests to access my application from these registered devices, then I'm going to allow my user to access application. If user is sending a request from unrecognized device, unregistered device to my application, now again he passed the authentication, like means he used the username and password, correct username and password, but still just because there is a policy, conditional access policy, which checks the device registration. So if device is not registered, so he will not get access to application, correct? That is called conditional access. Similarly, we have different options into conditional access. We have risk management feature into cloud. We have licenses for Azure Active Directory, which we can use, and we would be able to get advanced features. Like I told you, like we can sync hybrid identity. To sync hybrid identity, we need license. So we have to purchase license, and we would be able to get advanced features from Azure Active Directory or Enter ID. When it comes to authorization, so for authorization, we have role-based access control into Azure RBAC. What is role-based access control? So role-based access control built on Azure Resource Manager. So it means you can authorize your users. Role-based access control means authorizing users to access your resources. So once user will pass authentication, so which resource user can access? Just because if I'll show you my portal, so in portal, if I'll go to category of resources, let me show you. So here you can see left hand side, you will get multiple categories for different types of resources, for compute, for storage, for network, for AI, ML, for IoT, for IO, for identity, for network, for migration. We have different categories here. So it means user who will pass authentication, we can access any tab now. So based on the authorization, based on the RBAC role, user would be able to access one service, and we will allow our user. How we will allow? Using RBAC, using role-based access control. So segregate duties within your team. So you can segregate duties within your team. You can allow your users to access particular resources, grant only the amount of access to users that they need to perform their job. And when it comes to scopes, that means where we can apply these roles. So we can apply these roles, first of all, top level is subscription. Then inside your subscription, resource group, RG. Let me type here, RG, resource group. Then inside your resource group, resources like virtual machine, disk, storage. So resources. So we have three scope levels: subscription, resource group, and resource, where we can apply our RBAC role. And we would be able to authorize our user at three levels. So if I applied any role on subscription level, it will automatically inherit to down level. The inheritance is there. It will automatically inherit to down level. And again, as you can see in chat box, so there is a feedback link. I would again request all of you to give your valuable feedback for this webinar. A concept for this RBAC. So security principle. In RBAC, there would be few components like security principle. So what is security principle here? Object that represents something that is requesting access to resources like user, group, or any application. Role definition, that is permission. So collection of permission that lists the operations that can be performed, and scope, boundary, where you are going to scoping this permission. So boundary for the level of access that is requested, and assignment, assigning the role. So attaching a role definition to a security principle at a particular scope, that is called assignment. The users can grant access, which described in a role definition, by creating an assignment. So we need to create a role assignment in which we will provide permissions, and permissions are written into JSON. That is written into a policy document, and that policy document is JSON document. Deny assignments are currently read-only, and which you can provide through Azure Blueprints and managed apps. The last topic for this webinar is monitoring. Just because when it comes to infrastructure deployment, how we will monitor our infrastructure, which tool we can use into cloud. So when it comes to Azure, in Azure we have Azure Monitor, the default tool. for monitoring and for troubleshooting. So where you would be able to collect your monitoring data from applications, from operating system, from Azure resources, Azure subscriptions, Azure tenants, and custom sources, that means from on-premises as well. So you will collect your monitoring data where we have two format: metrics, which is a numerical data, near and real-time data, and logs, which organize into different properties, which you will collect. After collecting, after monitoring, what you can do, you can send this data for advanced options, for insights, for visualization, for analyze, for respond. That means you can create alerts, and based on the alert, you can use either you can use SMS notification or auto scaling as well. You can use for auto scaling purpose as well. Let me give you a quick example. Let's assume I'm using high availability, where I'm using a group that is known as VMSS, virtual machine skill set. And I created initially two virtual machines, identical virtual machine. But I'm creating one condition here. If my CPU utilization increase, that means greater than or equals to 70%. For, that is condition for 5-minute duration. That is my data point. If my CPU utilization increase to 70% or greater than to 70% for 5-minute duration, then do one thing: add another instance automatically, which will be identical. So automatically increase instance, that is known as scale out. Similarly, just because when it comes to cloud, in cloud you will pay for the resources which you added into your account, into your subscription. What if I'm not utilizing my servers after a few hours? It means load decrease. Load decrease. If load decrease, it means I'm not utilizing these resources. So it means there should be scale in also. That means you have to remove your instances. So you will create next condition, which will be like if my CPU less than or equals to 20% for 5-minute duration, then do one thing: remove one instance. So it will automatically remove your one instance. That is called auto scaling. So we can perform auto scaling, which will be monitored by Azure Monitor, and this would be added into alerts. So whenever this alarm will be triggered, it will create an alert, and where auto scaling group will add or remove resources based on the conditions which we will specify. So that is the example of auto scaling. Hope that is clear. We can integrate with Event Hub, Logic Apps, or for integrating export APIs as well. So we have different sources, destinations where we can integrate our monitoring data. And when it comes to logs we can store into log analytic workspace, and where we would be able to query our logs as well. As a monitor alert, like I already explained you, we can set up alerts, and based on the alert you will get notification or auto scaling. So where you can set up alert, you will get different severity levels, like this would be a critical alert or informational or warning, so that you can define using your severity level. Whenever an alert will be triggered by Microsoft Azure Monitor, so you will get your alert state in new, like your ITSM tool. So in ITSM tool, if you will receive any ticket, so first initially your ticket will be into a new state. Then you will open your ticket. You will work on your ticket. So you're working on your ticket. So it means you acknowledge your ticket. And once you find the root cause problem, so you will close your ticket and you will provide a comment that is known as root cause. Correct. So similarly, when it comes to Azure Monitor, in Azure Monitor, you would be able to get alert, which will be in new state. You will open your alert. You will work on your alert. You will find a solution why this alert is triggered, and then you will close your alert once you will get your solution. Log analytics, as we can collect logs from different sources, from into Azure or from on-premises or from other cloud as well, which we can store into Azure. So where we will use log analytics workspace as a storage. Using log analytics workspace, what you will do, you will get a query panel where you would be able to query your logs. Where this log analytics workspace, it use a language which is similar to SQL. KQL, query to query language, which used by log analytics and which is similar to SQL. If you have knowledge of SQL queries, you can easily use KQL and you can execute your queries, and you would be able to get output based on the requirement. So we can use log analytics workspace as well to query logs. If we have some incident, we can query our incidents as well. If we patch our resources, and after patching our resource, if servers are down, corrupted, we can check last when we patched our servers. We can run a query and we would be able to troubleshoot also. For troubleshooting purpose, for querying purpose, we can use log analytic workspace. We are done with this webinar. This was the last topic for our webinar. I hope all topics are clear to everyone. If you have any query, any question, you have question and answer section where you can post your queries. And again, I would request all of you to give your valuable feedback. You all have feedback link in the chat box. Still, if you have any query related to our topics, let me show you once again. Azure Resource Management, Azure Networking, Azure Identity and Access Management, Azure Monitoring and Troubleshooting, you can post your questions and I will answer to your questions. And again, would request all of you to give your feedback. So please post your questions. If you have any doubt, you can post your questions. Yeah, correct. This course is in line with AZ 104. Correct. So when it comes to entering into cloud, so entering into cloud means first we need to start with fundamental AZ 900, which is not mandatory. It's not mandatory certification. Why? Just because if you already have IT knowledge, if you're coming from IT background, correct. So no need to go for AZ 900 as a fundamental. Directly you can go for AZ 104, which is basically for Azure infrastructure, Azure administration, where you will learn Azure infrastructure. Now, after AZ 104, either you can go for 305 Azure architecting and designing, or you can go for AZ 400 Azure DevOps. This would be your certification path. So either you can go for AZ 305 architecting and designing, or 400, which is basically for Azure DevOps for automation. Please give your feedback so that we can understand, and if there would be any recommendation, you can write your recommendation into feedback, which helps us to improve our services. So I hope this webinar agenda is clear to everyone, and in this short duration, I tried to deliver knowledge on all these topics. Again, all these topics are very vast when it comes to practical or hands-on. So it takes time. Still, if you have any query, any doubt, you can post your question either into chat box or into question and answer section. Again, I would request all of you to fill your feedback form. And if you have any query, you can post your question into chat section or into question and answer section. Yes, Vinay. So we're done with this webinar. If you have any query, Vinay, you can post your questions. Yes, so once you will join this course, you will get exam voucher. As we are Microsoft partner, so yes, you will get exam voucher. So Vinay, I hope I'm audible to you. If you have any query, you can ask a question. Jay, for this query, I would request you to write into the feedback so that our support team will answer. So guys, please fill this feedback form, which you can see in the chat section. So Jay, you can send your query to our support team, which you can see your support mail. As I can see, there's no query. So it means you're good to log off. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar. Bye-bye. Take care.